Denmark is one of the safest countries in the world, but these last months were remarkable. On July 24th, there was a shooting in central Copenhagen, and a 16-year-old boy from Sweden was arrested. A week later, another person was shot, and again, the suspect was a teenager from Sweden. These kids are often recruited on Telegram with messages like these, which offer $48,000 for a job in Denmark. The next day in Copenhagen, there was an explosion. The day after, there was a double shooting. This was the third incident with Swedish criminals in 1 week.
Regeringen ser på problemet med allra största allvar.
The police set up security zones where they could stop and search people without probable cause. Copenhagen lies just a bridge away from Sweden, where gang-related crime has been spiraling out of control. This is blamed on the poor integration of immigrants.
Sverige ska bli bra igen.
This led in 2022 to the first right-wing government to be elected since the 1930s. Sweden and Denmark in recent years were polar opposites with regards to immigration policy. Denmark was unusually strict and wanted to do the bare minimum, whereas Sweden had some of Europe's most generous asylum policies. But Sweden's new right-wing government is taking a U-turn, and they're looking at Denmark for inspiration.
Vi ligger i praktiken 10-15 år efter Danmark.
While Denmark is tightening its border security. This is how Sweden's gang violence is spreading to Denmark with hindsight. So if you, like me, are a small business owner, here's a short message from today's sponsor, Odoo. Odoo is a software that makes the management of your business so much easier. It works with apps. If you need help with accounting, CRM, timesheets, inventory, or whatever you can imagine, Odoo has an app to make it easier. Odoo is offering the first application 100% for free, and then if you want to have 2 or more applications, you change to the paid plan. So let me show you how the website application works. They ask a couple of questions about your goals, your color palette, and about which pages you want, and then you can select your theme. Their site builder is super intuitive and easy. You simply drag and drop blocks and then customize them in the sidebar if necessary. And this includes unlimited hosting and support. So if you think that this could be for you, click on the link in the pinned comment or in the description to claim your first application for free. Now, back to the video. The Swedish welfare state is world famous. Sweden's quality of life, public health, and educational performance rank amongst the best in the world. They have relatively high equality rates and low poverty rates, and they consistently rank amongst the happiest people on Earth. At the height of the migrant crisis in 2015, Swedes showed incredible compassion and opened their country. This led the number of asylum seekers to increase substantially in the mid-2010s, but that's where it went wrong. They disproportionately ended up in poor neighborhoods, where over the years, parallel societies emerged. First and second generation immigrants are now 9 times more dependent on government welfare, and almost half of them is unemployed. Immigrants are often segregated in poor communities. In the most extreme cases, like the Stockholm suburb Rinkeby, nearly 90% of the population has an immigration background. This led to social exclusion and in turn to gang formation. As gun violence was going down in other parts of the EU, in Sweden, it was going up. Stockholm now has roughly 30 times more gun violence than London, and Sweden has the highest gun crime death rate per capita in the EU. Sweden had been incredibly generous with its asylum laws, but they failed to integrate new arrivals. Denmark was the opposite, and they saw Sweden as a cautionary tale. In 2017, in Rinkeby, the police arrested a man on suspicion of dealing drugs. After which, 20 to 30 masked men gathered near the site and clashed with the police. The rioting lasted for 4 hours, and several cars were set on fire. This was big news in Denmark, and the following year they passed the so-called ghetto laws, aiming to rid Denmark of ghettos by 2030. These laws were condemned in the international media because they targeted non-Western immigrants and forced them to integrate.
Og selve udspillet jo et angreb på beboerdemokratiet.
It became mandatory to put children in daycare for 25 hours per week, or you would risk losing your welfare payments, and sentences for crimes in these ghettos were automatically doubled.
Eksplosioner rystede København. Fremmedkrigere, bandeopgør.
The current prime minister took office around that time and then continued these trends. Denmark became the first European country to start deporting Syrian refugees, and she outlawed donations from Qatar and Saudi Arabia to mosques in Denmark. Sweden's officials criticized Denmark, but public opinion in Sweden also was beginning to shift.
Till er som nyligen anslutit er till livesändningen så är det flertalet bilar som brinner, troligen 8-9 stycken som brinner.
In late 2018, 89 cars were set on fire in 11 different locations in southern Sweden. The following night, 5 more were torched. In April 2022, a Danish politician announced his plans to visit Sweden to hold public Quran burnings. Riots broke out throughout the country. These events intensified discussions about the challenges of multiculturalism, free speech, and immigration policies, and it led to a once fringe party to gather support.
Sverige ska bli bra igen. Och ska Sverige bli bra igen, då behövs det någonting nytt.
A spokesman of the Sweden Democrats posted a tweet with the image of a metro on their party's colors. And the text reads, "Welcome aboard the Repatriation Express. Next up, Kabul." The Sweden Democrats had always been isolated by other parties because of their fascist roots, but they claim to have distanced themselves from this past. One of their catchphrases was to make Sweden great again. This rhetoric worked, and in the 2022 elections, they won a remarkable 20% of the votes. The Sweden Democrats were now the largest party in a right-wing coalition.
Vår situation är så katastrofal att vi måste göra mycket mer än andra länder i vår omvärld.
And they announced sweeping plans.
Begränsade rättigheter i asylprocessen.
They announced to cut benefits and to streamline deportation.
Regeringen lägger om migrationspolitiken. Det är tuffa och svåra beslut, men helt nödvändigt.
Their goal was to make Sweden an unattractive destination for refugees and to follow in Denmark's footsteps.
Och då måste man göra det med desto större kraft och beslutsamhet, och det tycker jag att ni visar vägen, så det uppskattar jag verkligen.
Some of their plans were even tougher. The proposed snitch law would force public sector workers like doctors and teachers to report any contact with undocumented people, which could lead to them being deported. Sweden also started investigating their own ghetto laws. They wanted to put a 50% cap of non-Nordic citizens in ghettos.
But is this integration or discrimination, or both?
And they're offering financial rewards for immigrants wanting to leave the country. Critics argue that these policies are completely missing the point, and that the real causes of crime are poverty, racism, and social exclusion, and that this was only going to make it worse. During their first full year in office, the number of asylum seekers went down to the lowest point since 1997. And for the first time in 50 years, Sweden had net migration, mostly due to foreign-born residents from Iraq, Somalia, and Syria who decided to leave the country. But crime levels are still unaffected. The number of shootings last year was about the same as during previous years, and so far 2024 has a similar number of shootings as the previous year in the same month. In fact, last year in September, Sweden had a record number of monthly fatal shootings. It started with the murder of a 58-year-old woman in Uppsala, who turned out to be the mother of one of Sweden's gang leaders. The police suspected that his former partner commissioned the attack, and the two gangs have been at war ever since. The leaders of these gangs live in Iraq, Lebanon, and Turkey, and they use apps like Signal and Telegram to recruit freelance criminals. An apple emoji means throwing a grenade. A water pistol, murder. Combating the number of asylum seekers is one thing, but rooting out crime is much more complex. Sweden also adopted the Danish security zones, which allows the police to perform searches of people and cars without the suspicion of a crime. A month after it came into effect, in Norrköping, 2 men were executed in an apartment building. The police suspected that this was linked to organized crime and decided to establish a security zone. It lasted for 2 weeks as required by law, and 368 people and 41 cars were searched. The second security zone was established only a week later near Stockholm. But here's the problem. The day after it ended, a hand grenade was thrown into a shop. The next day, there was another gang-related shooting. These security zones are hardly effective at addressing the root cause of the problem. There is a lot of work to be done and a lot of policy to debate, but in the meantime, criminal organizations are expanding their business to Denmark and even to Finland and Norway. This toxic environment is partly blamed on the poor integration of migrant communities, but that's just one of the many underlying societal issues that Sweden needs to address if it wants to get this escalating violence under control. If you enjoy watching these videos, here are 2 more videos that I selected for you to consider for your next watch.